Democracy always on my mind. I'm stacking knowledge, no time to waste. Gotta invest smart, gotta keep up the pace. I'm reading books, learning all the tricks, studying the market, making calculated picks. I'm saving up my dough, watching it grow. No more wasting money on things I don't really know. Financial smarts, that's my new swag. Investing wisely, no more burning cash, I'm building wealth. $1 at a time, going from broke to living the life that's prime.
What's good, everybody? It's your boy Reckless Raiden and we are back at it again with another episode of Future Financial Strategies. Shout outs to Delta Investment Tracker app for the sponsoring of the show, the platform, and myself. They're amazing. They're awesome. I use it. The pro features are great. Gives you more detailed insight, up-to-date information, and it tracks both your crypto and your traditional finance brokerage accounts. Jumping into the topic of the video, we're going to jump right in. When I set out on this initial journey and I started up this show, it was based on me testing things with my bank account, my brokerage account, my crypto brokerage, my money. And then reporting back as somebody who is probably the only person who's speaking on finance, who is not trying to be a guru, who doesn't make six figures and is a bazillionaire, talking to you from a mountaintop. It's me testing things, actively working it out of the mud, just like the rest of you. Caveat being, I might have read a few more books and tried a few more things. I might have a slightly higher financial IQ than some of you. I'd say I'd probably have a financial IQ that's higher than some of you who make more money than me. I dare say. But that's the reason I started this show. It's just a documentation of my journey, testing things with my accounts and, checking back in with the results. Now, recently, I've suffered an injury. I was out of work. Not completely out of work. I could work from home because fortunately I have a slightly different dual skill set that are juxtaposed to each other. But it put a lot of things in perspective, and it's really kind of put me in a laser-like focus on attaining the wealth metrics that I've set out, which is basically to get to a point to where I don't have to go to work. Now, fun fact, I don't have to make six figures to not go back to work. It's actually pretty humorous when I cut back to the quick and looked at what those numbers actually were to achieve financial freedom, which is not having to go to work. Which means that if next time I mess myself up and I got to stay home for a month, I'll make exactly the same amount of money because, well, actually it'll be half, but I'm not living hand to mouth currently. So it's dialed in some perspective. So we're back, ears to the ground, eyes wide open, looking for more tools to do this more efficiently. Because as I spent this time sitting down, all this downtime, I'm back at the job now. But during that month of downtime, I did a lot of thinking. And I'm like, I'm really good at working hard and just strength based. I'm highly adaptable. Very well liked. Very well liked. I'm a, not throwing the race card out here, but I'm a black man who works in construction half the time. It's half construction, half IT. But I'm knee deep in construction. Everyone likes me. I'm well liked, well spoken, have a lot of harebrained ideas, willing to try stuff, willing to fail, willing to ask questions. But one of the things that I'm not good at is breaking out of the narrative that was set by my family, which is we work hard with our bodies. And so, I took the next evolutionary step, and it's like we work hard with our bodies, but like we're going to actually build wealth. I got to that point. But that transition from the physical labor to the brain labor is where the discrepancy is. And so we've been starting to make some moves within our portfolios. Like, as you can see, we've launched the traditional finance portfolio to buffer ourselves so we don't have to touch the crypto. And we're making these systematic moves that are moving over to where it's like, yo, like you're making money with your brain. Like, you're not going out here and putting in manual labor, having to show up, having to be subject to somebody else's scheduling. Because the reality of it is the game that you play once you get into the financial literacy game is building up to a point, in my opinion, otherwise, like, what's the point? Building up to a point to where you get to dictate your hours. You get to dictate what you're doing. You get final say. Because like right now at my job, I don't have final say. I'm a partner in the company, but I don't have final say. I don't get to pick what, like, if I get to go to marketing events. I don't get to pick it. I don't get to do any of the stuff that like I would necessarily like to do if it was mine. And it's stuff that I'm good at. So it's like a whole skill set is completely wasted, which is probably why I'm on social media to begin with, like, honestly. But it's not my show, not my circus. I consider it a job plus. Like, I'm not completely like, oh, I work for myself. Like, I partially work for myself, but like realistically, the majority owner gets final say on everything. Like, I don't get final say, which bugs the shit out of me. Like, especially like if you're not wrong. And I don't like it, which is the reason I tell people straight up, I'm a terrible employee. Like, I'm really good at everything that I do, and I'll be the best person who works there. But like, as an employee goes, you want a cog. You want somebody who shows up, gets their check, works hard, and is thankful to God that you just gave them the opportunity to have a job. And I'm not thankful. I could go get another job. It's not hard for me to get a job. I outwork everybody. The job is not impressive to me, nor am I going to say thank you, because I know how stuff works. It's the curse of knowing. Like, once you know how the bread's made, it's not impressive anymore. Me showing up to work and telling the person who makes money off me thank you when they're making money off me, I'm not like, yeah, like, cool. If I like the job, great. But like the thought process of you're doing me a favor does not exist over here. Because I'm like, okay, well, I'll go have somebody else do me a favor, and I'll do them a favor by making them a bunch of fucking money and making them well-liked and making their business amazing. But I'm not going to tell you thank you for that, because if you were paying me what I should get paid, you couldn't afford to have me be here because you wouldn't make money. That's the reality of the situation. So for me, it's always a competition. The more, and that's not to say that I don't appreciate showing up. Like, I love working. I will never probably not work, but I know what it is. Like, this is something to do. I need to keep a roof over my head. And in doing so, like, you make money off of me showing up and being fucking amazing. But that said, like, for me, when I got into when I started down this journey and I started kind of getting, I'd say a little bit over a decade ago, when I got into the crypto space, the competition became, I've got to beat my pay. I've got to be able to not have to go up in this place anymore. Like, I want it to be to a point to where I'm making so much more outside of work that, like, showing up and being stressed out just isn't going to happen. Like, unless it's something that I'm 100% in control of, or something that I've got final say on. Because at that point, that will be the next level for me. Like, the ownership interest, great. I think everyone should advocate for that. I think if you're not striving for that, then you're wasting your time at a place, in my opinion, unless you were on a journey to get out of having to go to work, period. Like, there's just really no point unless you just need something to do in insurance. So as we've been building our wealth, the strategy originally, we were just going to bank on Bitcoin, and I was just going to cash out and just live off Bitcoin. And that was the thought process. And then I realized, getting probably about 3 years into it, that I need to not ever sell my Bitcoin. So then it became, okay, well, I have certain metrics that I need to get in the cryptocurrency space. and attain mastery at that. And I've been doing it for a decade. I've done my 10,000 hours. I put in the work. I've got my PhD in Bitcoin. Call me Dr. Bitcoin, I guess. And I've got a pretty good flow over there. I've got a pretty good setup, a pretty good idea where I'm going, a pretty good trajectory. That portfolio actually just runs itself almost at this point. Like, I have to manage it, but like, as far as me having to put more money into it, I have directed my attention towards the traditional finance space, specifically because I need income generated in front of that so I don't have to touch it, so it can continue to grow the way that it needs to. So we're looking at where we're sitting right now with the debt situation. We had a surgery that we had to pay for, a couple of things that we had to get done therein with the surgery and whatnot. And so we racked up some additional debt. The first thing I did when I hurt myself was I went out and took out another $8,000 in debt to acquire more assets, because that was the goal. And like, as I was sitting there, so I do my best thinking when I'm extremely stressed, and hurting myself and being put down on a couch for darn near pretty much a month really stressed me out, because I'm a very active person, and I injured myself. All the things that I can't do now, the inability to go to work, feeling useless, the feelings of depression, sadness, guilt, woefulness, uselessness, all of those things that just attack your mind and kind of make you want to eat all of your pain meds. Triggered my stress response. And my stress response, really, that's when I do my best thinking, because like, I'll sort out a problem. And like, the immediate problem that I had, that I dialed in on, was if you were rich, this would not be an issue. And it resonated deeply. So then that thought turned into, okay, where are you at in your journey? Can you weather this storm? Answer was yes, absolutely. Next, I'm scrambling around thinking of all the money pools I have access to. Next, I'm trying to figure out, okay, so since I have to pay for the surgery out of pocket, how am I paying that back? Am I going to liquidate assets? If I'm going to liquidate assets, which assets am I going to liquidate? Is there a way that I can pay this back without liquidating assets? Because one of the things I am adamantly against, for me personally, is liquidating assets to buy things, period. I don't like to do that unless it was specifically something that was saved in an asset vehicle, specifically for the purpose of spending. Now, the way that I had my finances set up, like, we'd already hit our metric for the opportunity fund, but I didn't want to liquidate that, because that was supposed to be going towards the next property or upgrading this property. So we had to protect those funds. So I took out another $8,000 in debt. This is the way my brain works. It's gonna come full circle, and you'll understand why they call me Reckless Ray De Niro here. So I took out another $8,000 in debt, put a little bit into crypto, put the majority of it into my brokerage account. Reason being, I was like, I'm gonna buy assets that produce income. I will pay this debt back with cash once I get back to work, and the income that's generated. Worst case scenario, if this doesn't play out the way that I want it, there's going to be a chunk of money after a few months of these payments where I figure out if this is going to work or not. And then I'll just liquidate the assets and pay it back out of that a few months down the road, if this becomes an issue, or if I'm laid up and I'm not generating enough income out of this to pay everything back. I was just going to clean wash the entire debt. Now, mind you, at the time we were sitting at about, I'd say peak was like $20,000. And this is because I'm on a high yield, the high deductible plan. I don't go to the doctor, and I have this is the first real injury I've ever had since I was 13 and got hit by a car. Like, first real injury, torn Achilles in decades. So I don't get hurt. I don't get sick. I got COVID. I was down for 2 days. Well, no, it was 3 days. 3 days. And then after the third day, it was just getting used to being awake because I slept for basically 3 days. I don't get sick. And when I get sick, I don't stay sick. And normally if I injure myself, it's not for very long or I just heal. And there's no doctor involved in 90% of this. Like COVID, I went and got the COVID test. That was it. Just came laid in bed and was like, well, if he dies, he dies. I Dolph Lundgren myself and got better. So I don't normally go to the doctor, and we were using the overfunding your HSA as one of the plays. So there was a little bit of money in there. So I was like, cool, I got that money that I can bring out to pay some of this back. But with that, everything's deductible. So I went, got my surgery. I paid the surgery in full the day of because we have access to credit. That's the reason you want to have good credit, so that you can have credit, so you can have buffer money. So I paid in full, paid for all my stuff, got all the gear that I needed, ordered stuff off Amazon to get around. I got a little peg leg thing that I can hobble around in so I can get up and down stairs. I got braces. I got ace bandages. I got a foot boot. And with all that, it's, we racked up some more debt so that I had an additional on top of the 8,000. I had an additional, I think it was almost $4,000 on my other card on top of that. So that was 16. So yeah, we were at peak. It was like $21,000, which brings me to sorry for the long-winded story, but we got to give the context. Which brings me to the velocity banking. I've been kind of mulling around, looking at it as a tool, being like, hey, that seems kind of interesting. There's some tweaks that I see that could be way more efficient for my personal financial state and the state that I advocate for those of you over here rocking out with me in the wolf pack that I advocate for. Because like I said, I don't teach people stuff. I just kind of use tools and show you how my stuff's set up, and then you guys can do with it what you will. At a certain point, we might do like a Patreon or something where you guys can get access to the stuff early, just like everybody in the Bag Chasers and my family over at Circa 84 do, which are two communities I'm a part of that, both of which get access to my crypto videos earlier. But I think if I do a Patreon or something, I'll start doing all of these videos live. So that way there can be a Q&A part in it. And we can just kind of hash out and talk, and then everybody else will get it later and realize how much they missed out on us hashing out and talking up here. And we can do that, and it'd be like a members only type deal for all my episodes. We could do something like that. I could do something like that. And then obviously it would have some extra game that I don't want necessarily out there publicly about some of the specifics on stuff that I do in crypto. Maybe go into deep detail on how I set my accounts up. It's convoluted though. You're talking about somebody who doesn't budget. So like the way that my brain works, it's very all over the place, but it makes these beautiful mosaics and they seem to be pretty effective, especially when it comes to the finances. So we peaked at about 21,000. I used the high deductible plan, found out you get discounts on high deductible plans. So my surgery it was like what? I think it was like $3,800 or something like that. It got discounted down to where it was like $800. And I was like, that's cool because I have that money. Like, that's great. So I was been waiting for them to get their refund, but I went ahead and been doing some research on the velocity banking. I'd been probably about a month and a half before this event happened, and I decided to start pulling switches while I was stressed out. I'd been talking about this, thinking about it in my head, watching every bit of content that I could find. And I found I'm finding that there's these little pockets on YouTube, like once you start going down rabbit holes on stuff. And so there's a pocket of people talking about velocity banking. I settled on following the Stidhams. And the reason is I like their channel. I like their content. I like the way that Mr. Stidham explains stuff. Mrs. Stidham is there backing him up, moving him around the screen. I enjoy their content. So that's who I got the game from. And they're really good at explaining it. Now, they're also really good at helping people get set up and going through your finances with you to figure out how to effectively apply velocity banking. Now, me personally, like I said, I don't sell anything over here. I get like a sponsorship every once in a while from a Delta investment tracker app out there, because people who wander from industry to my channel know that I know what I'm talking about, at least a good grip. So, you know, you end up getting some sponsorships here and there, but this is more about the documentation of the journey as opposed to trying to be for everybody. And I don't know how everybody else gets big channels, but I'm not everybody's cup of tea, because at the end of the day, like, this is documentation for some of the people down the road to look back and see where the start of this generational wealth came from, to see the thought process while I was building out some of these portfolios that will be handed down to my great nieces and nephews, because I am trying to change the family narrative and I am trying to instill some generational wealth before I'm dead. So there's some things that are being put in place that will be going to some great nieces and nephews that, you know, they'll be able to see, because like these portfolios are going to be getting tracked in here as well. So that's the reason majority of why I'm doing this. We're also trying to get to a situation where we don't have to go into places that we don't have final say at, like, obviously. And it's a race, because it's not like I'm turning down any raises, but I'm also not asking for them, because at the current clip that I'm at, I'm giving myself roughly a $10,000 raise every year. And I'll just continue doing that until I don't have to go there, like, to be honest. And it technically could get sped up because we're during a bull run season, and, you know, there's going to be some growth in there. But my initial portfolio is about specifically income. Now, the items, obviously they're going to be tagged. They'll have a link down under the news section. Actually, I'm just going to put news and influences. I guess we'll make it a news and influence section, so that way we can support our fellow content creators in these spaces. I'm going to start doing a lot more of that, because everybody deserves to get their roses. So if people help me, I'm going to try and give a little shout out, especially when I'm taking the knowledge that they gave and tweaking it, because that's what we do over here. I don't just do stuff the way that people say to do it. It's unfortunately, I don't even think it's a character flaw. I like improving things. Like, I'm like, if I can make this more efficient, then I'm going to do that. And it's not to say that the original core concept isn't efficient. It's just the way that my finances are set up, and the level of aggressiveness that Reckless Ray Dinero has in his soul when it comes to doing anything. I'm highly competitive. Highly competitive. And money is the best game ever. It's a lifelong game. It's like golf. You can just keep getting more of it. You get better at it. And then you get to show people like, hey, I'm doing this, this, and this. And they're like, oh, I've got more money than you. And I'm like, but what's your growth? Is your growth better than mine? Because if it's not, then at a certain point I catch up to you. Right? But so I like to tweak things. Like, I take things, I bring them into my system, throw the little Reckless Ray Dinero sprinkle zest on there, and then we're off to the races. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about doing the update on velocity banking, because I am all in on this. Since my first decision to do this, which was April 26th was my surgery. I got out of surgery. 2 days later on pain meds, I pulled $8,000 in debt out and started putting it in the market. And we started building portfolios. And then probably about another 2 weeks after that, so it was like middle of May, I was like, yeah, we're gonna start getting into this velocity banking. So my last paycheck. No, that was my second paycheck. So I had two paychecks. So I had one in May, and then I just got paid again on the 7th of this month. And that paycheck was my second paycheck into the velocity banking. And the original credit card that we had switched and decided to utilize as our debt tool, because it didn't have anything on it at the time, was up to almost $4,000. So we just went ahead and started, but I was keeping tabs on it because I knew I was getting a refund from the insurance company for about $2,900. So there was $2,900 that was getting wiped. And then there was, so like I started paying it down, and my math was a little bit off because I thought I still had one more payment to go full bore on there. But we cleared, because when I originally did the math, it was $1,800 that was on that card from the surgery and the initial stuff that was on there that we actually needed to account for. Like, we needed to take care of that. So that was 2 paychecks. And like, obviously the other cards that I have, I'm still managing those balances, but like, instead of paying every single check, like, I'm looking to see what I actually have to pay to get it out of the way. So that way we're not hitting late fees. Cause I know that like some people, they do take them late fees when they're infinite banking. I'm not one of those people. I do care about my credit in the sense that like, I don't want a bunch of late fees and finance charges on there. But that card, this next check, we've got about $300 left. And so like, we're taking a chunk off that. And one of the tweaks that I'm doing, and this is going to be my first divergent from the just straight through, because like, I'm not jumping the next card up there. I'm paying back that debt. And then I moved my in-home banking, which I charge myself 10% to borrow money from myself. Because if you're going to pay the credit card company, I don't see why you're not paying yourself. Also, I got that from the people who use the life insurance products. Those of you who use that for your in-home banking pool, I do the same thing, except for I just use my savings account because I don't believe in stagnant money. So if I'm not borrowing it, there'd be no point in it sitting there, and it wouldn't be. So I've got that account, got a little bit on that, and we're going to have a little bit left over. But what we're doing, this is going to be interesting, is I'm making a slight pivot. And I think that it's going to be more efficient in paying off, but it also is going to allow me to do some growth of my portfolio during this process. So as we pay those 2 things off, I'm going to take the rest of that check, and it's going into my income portfolio to generate income. And the reason being is we're taking that monthly income, which as of this month will be the first month that I get full bore of what it's supposed to be. But it's looking like it's going to be about $880. That's right. $800 a month, a little over $800 a month off of a $16,000 portfolio. Let that sink in. And I go high income. We're tracking that monthly, and we do an update on it monthly. So you got to tap in. It's going to be under this playlist of future financial strategies. We've got a couple of things that are hitting monthly now in this. Like, you get your weekly episode the first Monday of every month. You get the portfolio update, as long as it's like not the first Monday of this next month. Might be a little bit difficult. It might be the second. Might be the first Tuesday. You guys might get hit twice on Tuesdays, or you might get a video on Tuesday because Monday is a day after Sunday. Well, all the dividends should be paid by Friday then. We'll see. We'll see how the dividends roll in, because I'm new to the dividend market. But I know how income works. And as long as it's there, you'll have an update the first Monday of every month, or the Tuesday, depending on how those months play out. But on how that portfolio is building out. But the thing that we're doing that's a little bit different is 70% of that dividend income is going into our infinite banking cash flow. So as we pay these cards off, as we slip into the next card, instead of just rolling that excess money off that check into the next card, the excess money at the end of a payoff rolls into the dividend account. Now, this account specifically, not the account, this time around specifically, since we're paying off 2 things, we're going to roll whatever's left into the dividend account, get those positions built up. Afterwards, starting the next week, we're going to start using the 2 debt tools that actually fund Reckless Ray DeNaro's money pool, the Ray DeNaro's internal bank, which is, we're going to be using the Cash App, because while Cash App charges 6%, since I charge myself 10%, I get 4% off of my Cash App loans. So we're going to be using the Cash App, and we're going to mix that with our in-home banking savings, and we're going to use that as a battering ram to start chunking at this debt, because both of those are relatively low. And as we get the in-home banking pool built up this way, we'll shift over to where it's going to be exclusively that once it gets to the point to where it's an entire month's cash reserve of what it would be for utilities. So we'll have 1 month in cash reserve that just sits in cash, but that's going to be the in-home banking pool, and we'll use that, and we're just going to keep stacking it and just using that to steamroll it through, because both of those are normally, like, both of those accounts, the Cash App's only $650, so that's an instant payback. But as we do that, we'll push that. And so what we're doing is we're pulling the higher interest debts into a lower interest debt vehicle, and then we're infinite banking out of those lower interest. Plus, it's building up my cash pool. So, like, I feel like this is like a double win in this respect versus just being 100% solely on that card. And it'll chunk it down a little bit faster, because even after we pay those back, there's still going to be a little bit extra on top of that to go back in there. So, like, we're going to do, so we've done the 2 checks, the one way, cleared a card. The other cards are much bigger. So they're both about $8,000. One of them is sitting in a state right now, though, where it's 0% interest. So I'm putting that one second. The one that's currently actively expensive, we're gonna attack that. And then, I just got another round of those tasty low interest balance transfer opportunities, and we might offload a little bit more into the zero interest ecosystem. But it really depends on how fast it's looking like we're going to be paying these positions back, because right now it's like it's almost to the point to where I'm like, man, I might not do it and just hold those depending on how fast this goes, because I didn't expect to pay that card off that fast, which is the reason that I'm all in on this. But like, now we're tweaking it. But after these cards are paid, after the cards are paid back, I want to do a few months, at least a few months or to see if this works, as velocity banking out of the income account, because then you get your bills set up for what your dividend income is, and all of your working capital goes into building that portfolio out to continue to expand it. And as it does that, I think if this works correctly, you should be able, like, if you do that for like a year and you're at a point to where you're able to pay all of your monthly expenses off of that dividend, and then you keep stacking it for a year, if you shift back into a debt tool, because like I would still use the debt tool to do the points game for the credit cards to get like travel points and stuff, because I prefer to travel for points than spend my money, even though I spent my money to get the points, but it's just stuff I regularly do anyway. But like, if you did that, then you would constantly, for however long you decided to remain working, you would be building a backstop, and you could have a completely agree. Like, if I put all of my money, because right now it's $16,000 and I'm getting $800 a month, which is $10,000 a year. Like, if you just stack that out and like you're living out of that, and like you figure out how to condense down to where you're just using your dividend money to pay your expenses, boy howdy, that's going to be something interesting, because then you're just building an infinite backstop of income, and then you can do a bunch of other interesting things. So I'm trying to get to that point. So we're trying to figure out the quickest ways to bring this debt down. And so we're going to test using the in-home banking, because that also builds up my personal capital. And actually, I think after we get to a certain point, the interest that I pay myself is going to go into the income account. I think we're going to do that, because that makes sense. Because I don't like keeping a lot of cash in the bank. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. It's what we're going to do. We're making cutoff metrics. Like, I like this. This idea is good. But yeah, that's the reason we think things through. Like, this is more of a sounding board for me. I get to talk to myself also via you guys, because you guys can respond down in the comments at the end of the video, and we can kind of hash out some strategy. But I really am on board with the velocity banking concept. I like everything that's going on with it so far. I'm seeing the performance. I'm seeing how it can machine gun through and help bring down those credit cards fast. And it's very counterintuitive, because I would have never thought to dump my whole check onto a credit card. Ever. I don't know. Like, it would have taken me so long to get around to that point that had I not come across it randomly and, come across the Stidham's channel, so that it would be a breakdown that I would sit through, because I watched some god awful ones and I didn't get it, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the people who were talking either. Like, it was crazy. But I got to the Stidham's, and the way that he broke that down made sense. And I was like, okay, I can apply this. This is usable. And I feel like, actually, I don't feel, I know that the velocity banking angle can get you to where you can implement an in-home banking strategy, because velocity banking is immediately applicable. Immediately. Like, if I had no debt, you could also make it applicable with the other plays. Like, for people who want to, for instance, if you're fine spending Bitcoin, living out of Bitcoin, you could also go that angle with it. Living out of your brokerage account with a high yield dividend account. That would also be an immediate start, because you just put everything there and then use those dividends. You build up that dividend base to where it can start paying for stuff. But for most people, we have some credit card debt. Most of us have a situation, a car, a house, something. And, I think the only thing that I probably won't be applying it to is my mortgage, because my mortgage interest rate is so low. And that's not to say that it's like, oh, well, like, what about that? It's just like, well, if I can build up an asset to pay for my other asset, then I would rather do that than put all that money and just be like, oh, well, I paid my mortgage off, but it took like 5 years of me not investing in my income account, which would have paid my mortgage off anyway, without me having to do anything. And then I would just have more money. So we're looking, that's going to be probably the last thing that I pay off, but that is what it is. Cause I mean, I have that payment low enough. Like, right now, my dividend account could pay my mortgage if I needed to. Like, worst case scenario, I wouldn't lose my house. Like, and my car is paid for, so I just couldn't have it leave the driveway. But like, I could keep my house indefinitely. Like, nothing would be on, but I could keep the property. And that's a really good feeling, and I want it to be able to pay for literally everything else that I do. And then as soon as we get to that point, because if I can match my salary here, then looking outside of the country, most of the places that I'm looking at, American dollar stretches a little bit further there, living like a king. Then that opens up some more options. But this is just an update, because we cleared a card. I'm really excited about it. This next pay period, we're going to have to take some copious notes of how that splits out. Cause like, I'm super excited to start checking these debts off. Cause like, I made a list of all my outstanding debts, and I'm like, we're getting 2 of the low ones. Obviously we went for the low hanging fruit first to test it. But like, now that we know that this can work, we're going to start seeing if we can make it work more efficiently to attack the higher hanging fruits, because now we're getting into the chunky cards. We're getting into the cards with some numbers on it. But until next week, it's your boy Reckless Ray Dinero. Again, shout out to the Stidhams. I got their channel down in the description, in the news section. Shout out to Delta Investment Tracker app. If you guys haven't tapped in with that to see if it will work for you, there is a link down in the description also that will send you over and just let them know that you found them via Reckless Raid and Narrow. Till the next time, people. Peace.
Money on my mind, yeah. Focus, got no time for games, nah. I don't play, man, I'm all about that financial literacy. Investing in my future, building generational wealth. Dollar bills, they be calling my name, but I ain't chasing fame, I'm chasing change. Learn the game, now I'm playing it smart. Putting my money to work, it's an art. I'm stacking paper, building my own empire. No more living check to check, I'm getting higher. Investing in stocks, real estate, and more. Gotta secure the bag, that's what I came for.